Throughout the Second World War, there were many women who were affected by the conflict. Thousands were forced out of their homes, and lots were deported to concentration camps. As the Allies liberated different parts of France, they came across the Ugly Carnival, which was where French women who had slept with the German enemy were being paraded in huge aspects of public humiliation. Many of the French women had their heads shaved, and they were sometimes marked with swastikas and were forced to run the gauntlet. Members of the French resistance saw this as the ultimate humiliation, sleeping with the enemy, and they encouraged the French people to hit and beat the women. Some victims in Paris were even killed by the public during the Ugly Carnival, but in Germany there was also a significant amount of shame poured upon women who were considered the worst in German society, as the Nazis deemed they had slept with their enemies, and the people who Hitler would go on to persecute. Join us today as we look at the horrific torture of the German women that slept with their enemies, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Inside of Nazi Germany, there was a concept known as Rassenschande or Blutschande, which was considered racial shame or blood disgrace. This was when Hitler believed that Aryans were sleeping with non-Aryans, and this was even enforced through policies and certificates. These laws banned relations between ethnic Germans and non-Aryans, and those who would later go on to be persecuted, such as the Jews. During the war years, there were millions of accounts where the German army or the SS violated the beliefs on who they should sleep with, and they assaulted a number of women on the Eastern Front, for example. Before the Nazis came into power, Hitler spoke a great deal about the watering down of the Aryan race through what he believed was Aryan men and women sleeping with non-Aryans, and he would attribute this to elements of German society or events and disasters such as Germany losing the First World War. Prominent Nazis also argued for the death penalty for Jews who were found having relations with Aryans, but when they came into power, there were many efforts by the Nazis to define who was considered a Jew. Different Nazis had different ideas on this, and how much of their heritage defined them in this category. Inside of the Third Reich, local officials were asking couples that were getting married to present proof of their Aryan status and ancestry, and they would be able to marry if both of them could prove their family history. Couples who were considered mixed race would have their marriage applications delayed, and when the Nuremberg laws were passed, the SS went around arresting anyone who was accused of committing acts of racial defilement. Many of those who were arrested were then paraded throughout the streets and German towns to shame them. They had placards placed over their necks that told the crowds what they had done. One girl was paraded throughout a town with a sign saying, "I have given myself to a Jew," and this was aimed to humiliate her, and then people would jeer and shout abuse at her and also throw things. The SA or stormtroopers also encouraged German people to treat mixed couples with animosity, and there were acts of violence against people who were in relationships with those considered non-Aryans. There was one incident in which a Jewish man had enticed a girl into an evening swim at midnight, but the SS intervened, and then a mob of thousands besieged this man's house, and the police had to take him into protective custody for his own safety. The Nuremberg laws were passed to define that relations of marriages between Aryans and non-Aryans were banned, and against the law. More people were being paraded throughout the streets for their crimes, and many were convicted of having relations with the enemies of the Nazis, and for this they were sent to concentration camps for varying periods of time. The laws did not at this time call for executions for those who were considered to have conducted acts of racial defilement, as the Germans would in a sense be executing some of their master race. The police struggled to keep up with the amount of crimes which were being committed regarding this sort of behaviour, and those Germans who married Jews and other non-Aryans before the Nuremberg laws did not have to have their marriages dissolved. They were instead pressurised by groups such as the SA and were told to divorce their partners. During the Second World War, there were large-scale assaults committed by the Wehrmacht in areas such as the Eastern Front, where they encountered non-Aryan women. Many soldiers would assault and then kill their victims to make sure they would not inform the Nazi authorities of them. As the Second World War broke out, the Nazis banned any relations between Germans and foreigners, and the Nazis discovered that there were accounts of Polish women sleeping with German soldiers. Because of this, they issued decrees in the press and said that any German soldier who slept with a Polish woman was living dangerously, and they were compared in literature to Jews and Gypsies to try and dissuade fraternisation. The Nazis would then state that whilst they were occupying Poland, that any Polish person that had relations with a German man or woman, or someone who tried to coerce them into this manner, would be punished by execution and death. Himmler then also issued a similar decree to this in December 1942 regarding activity on the Eastern Front, as he was concerned about a risk for the racial integrity of the German nation. The death penalty would be imposed upon those women who were from countries that were the enemies of Germany, for example Britain, who were involved in sleeping with Germans. But during the war, many German women were treated in a similar way to the Ugly Carnival in France, after they were found to have slept with foreign workers also. They were often marched through the streets, and they had their heads shaved, and signs were placed again around their necks that told of the crimes they committed. One historian wrote of two cases, that in September 1940, Dora von Kalbitz, who was found guilty of having relations with a Pole, had her head shaved and was placed in the pillory of her town in Otschach near Leipzig, with a placard that proclaimed, "I have been a dishonourable German woman, in that I sought and had relations with Poles. By doing that I excluded myself from the community of the people." He also wrote, in March 1941, a married German woman who had an affair with a French prisoner of war had her head shaved and was marched through the town of Bromberg in Lower Franconia, carrying a sign which said, "I have sullied the honour of the German woman." These were German women who were being punished inside their own lands for sleeping with the enemies of the Nazis. There were some cases also where the young women who were victims of assaults were punished in the same manner, with their heads shaved, and they were also forced to parade throughout the streets. But one particular exhibition of this did not go down very well. Many Polish men from 1940 who slept with German women were also executed in public, and further efforts were made to enforce this. Public executions were done to make people think twice about their actions, and propaganda was also distributed throughout Germany and also occupied lands. The subject of racial defilement was even taught to children in schools. But thousands of people found themselves accused of the crime. For example, there were 1,500 people in Hamburg alone who were accused. Often for men, the punishment for violating the Aryan race was prison time or forced labour, and women were often tried for other crimes such as perjury, and they could also be sent to concentration camps. Himmler at one point even came to Hitler with the question, what should be the punishment for racial defilement, and Hitler replied with, have their hair shorn and sent to a concentration camp. Further virulent Nazis called for stronger sentences, including the complete death penalty, for this sort of behaviour, which was very shocking. However, there were thousands of German women who had relations with people that the Nazis would not approve of. The Nazis were so staunch and strong in their beliefs about a master race that they were happy to punish their own people, and they were happy to humiliate women in the same manner that the French also did. It was shocking behaviour that aimed to keep their master race pure, and there were horrific accounts of violence against women and men who maintained relationships that the Nazis disliked. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.